Michael and Val, thank you for your leadership and certainly Carol as well in pulling this together, but also the mental health strategy. And I'm sure you've heard the minister speak. When he was a parliamentary assistant, he and Christine Elliott, I believe, they co-chaired the select committee on mental health for the legislature. And we all know the minister's passion for mental health. In 1983, I took the first, what was called the Critical Incident Stress Management course in Florida. At the time, I worked in the ambulance service. And in 1986, we hired a psychologist. And that psychologist reported to me, and basically the terms of reference were just nod your head if things are getting worse or better, because we were very conscious about the relationship between staff and implementing something of a psychological nature into the workforce. In 2000, when I ran the ambulance service, I negotiated in the collective agreement that if an ambulance crew came upon a significant event, let's say in the morning, they could take the rest of the day off at no impact to their pay. And at that time, when I came back and said, you know, I want this in the collective agreement, basically people said, well, you just gave away the farm. That's never happened. In legitimate situations, which they all are, the incidence of people actually taking advantage of that is very small. In fact, it's almost non-existent. But people know it's there when they need it. So a lot of the myths related to mental health, and what if I do this, or what if I'm doing this? Oh, it's going to cost you a fortune. Well, I can tell you those that don't, it's going to cost them a hell of a lot more. So it's really important that, you know, we get the message out. You know, in my opening remarks, I said 3 things today that I really believe in. And one is impact, outcomes, and community of practice. And we've got to measure our effectiveness. So part of that, Carol's heard this till she blew in the face, but I'm tired of not being able to measure anything. I mean, people are doing a lot of good stuff, but we got to be able to show an impact. We've got to be able to look at, we've done a whole lot of really good work, and we know that there are idiosyncrasies amongst our sectors that we have to be conscious that construction's different than nursing, that's different from education, and everybody has their own perspective. But if we can look at how big, who is our audience, how big is it, and how much do we want to achieve over a period of time? What do we want to be able to look at, you know, can we at some point say 25% of the workplaces in this particular sector are early adopters, so that we can start looking at measuring impacts against those who aren't adopting a best practice or a leading practice and those that don't. Because it's really important that we're able to do that, to show progress ahead. And I come from an era of you can't manage what you can't measure, and I know that you can be data blind and miss the whole boat on it, but there's a happy medium that we can find. I think the other thing that we're starting to find too is that we've done the work that Kim Slade had mentioned, that a cross-section of people in coming up with a psychological standard for paramedics, that's great. We've got to get police on board, we got to get everybody on board. We supported another program back in about 5 years ago where Dr. Rennie McPhee from Waterloo had identified that 60% of physical injuries in paramedics had a mental health component. I always joke, it's like when my wife says we have to go shopping, my back gets sore. But I think, you know, all of the information is in front of us. We just need how to come up with, where do we go next with this? How do we move into our various respective markets? How can we show that we've made a positive impact? Because all of the work that you've done, this cross-section of really bright and talented people have done tremendous work. And I congratulate you to it for everything that you've done. And my story about starting 35 years ago, when we finally launched Bill 163 in 2016, and we look at that and we say, wow, this does take time to get into it. We can't lose our vigilance. We've got to keep plugging ahead, and we've got to come out with a strategy. So Carol is right. We're in the midst of writing. This year will be the conclusion of the first 5-year strategy, and we're now moving into what the next 5-year strategy is going to be. What do we want to be able to say we will be in 5 years, in 3 years? Even test ourselves, where do we want to be in a year from now? So that we can actually show that we've made measurement. And to the point about, is there incentives that are being looked at? Yes, we're looking at accreditation. That should be an announcement shortly from the minister. But with that is also the Health and Safety Excellence Program by WSIB, which they're working out the mechanics of incentivization and how that fits within the greater framework. We're close, but can't say anything right now, but definitely we're looking at what is best practice, whether it's in our friends in the EU or our friends across the border in Manitoba. Certainly, we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We just don't have enough resources. So anyway, Val, Michael, thank you for doing this. And thank you on behalf of the Ministry of Labour for attending this and making our workplaces all that much more safer. So glad to have been asked to do this. Thank you.